Well, good morning, everyone, or I guess it's noon now, but welcome to the 2023 Smithsonian Folklife Festival. For over 50 years, the festival has convened people on the National Mall to explore, exchange, and engage the power of culture and creativity in our lives today. This year, our two programs are the Ozarks, Faces and Facets of a Region, and Creative Encounters, Living Religions in the U.S. If you take some pictures today and videos of what you see, feel free to share them to our festival stories on social media with the hashtag 2020folklife.
Right.
Okay. The Smithsonian Folklife Festival is produced by the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage and presented in partnership with the National Park Service. This festival is made possible by people like you. Visit festival.si.edu to join our community of contributors. We also receive federally approved appropriated funds, Smithsonian Trust funds, contributions from governments, businesses, foundations, and individuals, and in-kind assistance and food, recording, and craft sales. Also, please keep in mind the festival strives to maintain an accessible and inclusive environment for visitors of all abilities. If you're in need of accessible seating options or assistance listening during this presentation, please see one of our venue manager volunteers wearing an Ask Me button. And this is such a fantastic festival, but it's made possible with some very generous sponsorships and supporters, and I'd like to mention those right now. The Ozarks program is produced in partnership with Missouri State University. The program is supported in part by Missouri State University, Missouri Division of Tourism, the Arkansas Tourism, University of Arkansas, Experience Fayetteville, Wingate Foundation, the Committee of 100 for Ozark Folk Center, Ozark Beard Company, Crystal Bridges, and Social Impact Accelerator Partnerships, and the Missouri Folk Arts Program. The program received federal support from the Latino Initiatives Pool, administered by the National Museum of the American Latino, the Asian Pacific American Initiative Pool, administered by the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, and the Smithsonian American Women's History Initiative Pool. In-kind support comes from Montana Cans and Mountain Valley Spring Water. So, thank you so much for being here today. We're going to talk today about boats across tradition. You know, boats of importance in the Ozarks culture. In the Ozarks, we are very fortunate to have a lot of water, streams, creeks, lakes, and it's a very important part of our culture from everything from recreation to sustaining life. And so boats have been a very important part of that culture, from fishing, obviously, to recreation, and in the early days, when in first settlement and our First Nations in the Ozarks, that was a way of travel throughout the Ozarks, making their way up through the rivers and to the interior of the rugged hill country of the Ozarks. And we're going to talk about boat making today from two regions of the Ozarks. It'll be southwest Missouri and also northwest Arkansas. Today I'd like to introduce to you Liton Beasa to my left, to the left.
Liton
Beasa, is that right?
Beasa.
Beasa.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
And then we have Litha Ralpho as well. And then we have Anthony Martin and Rebekah Martin. So Litha and Liton are from the Marshallese community of northwest Arkansas, and they have a very interesting boat building culture that we'd like to visit about today. And Anthony and Rebekah are from the southeast Missouri Ozarks around the Current River, and they're going to talk about not only the boats but also some of the fishing equipment known as a gig, fishing gig. So I'm really excited about that today. So Litha and Liton, let's talk a little bit about, explain to us about just can you give us a short history on the Marshallese and the Ozarks?
Hi everybody. In our language we say Yahweh. Can anybody say Yahweh? Good job. So there is, the last time we checked, 15,000 population Marshallese in the Arkansas itself. There is a bigger population of Marshallese in the Northwest area, mostly in the Springdale area, which we're all from. Everybody that all the participants that came here are from the Springdale area. So basically, we came from the Marshall Island, which is southwest of Hawaii, closer to Guam. It started off with older generations, late 70s, coming to a program for college, and then ever since then, they migrated to different states near in the Ozarks area, Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, in that area. So ever since that happened, everybody just started inviting their families over to come to get better opportunities in school education for sure. And yep.
So obviously in the Ozarks there's a different terrain, different vegetation, maybe even different waterways. So how has that impacted the boat building practices of the Marshallese as opposed to traditional practices?
Kumol,
Thank you.
Yakayale.
Hi everybody.
Ukatakayo katan maloy lo mayam, kap Arkansas, mayam le chol, Arkansas is iwit.
So one difference about Arkansas's lake is, or the water in Arkansas is water, but back home in the Marshall Island, it's salt.
What about materials in the Ozarks? Are there materials in the Ozarks that are helpful in the building of the Marshallese boats? As far as, is there a certain type of wood that's available, or do you need to import materials from the Pacific?
Engai, mora na yaman kachita ko. Elang meno mojige ko ami, chemarong company wagi ni not agar company wayo crystal bridges and shallow museum.
So yeah, all the materials that I use for the canoe, especially that 14-feet canoe that's near our tent, that's actually sitting out in the Crystal Bridges Museum. Those are all the materials there were from the Arkansas.
Anthony and Rebekah, so it's more, if I understand this correctly, it's more of a river type of culture in southeast Missouri Ozarks.
Yeah.
Can you describe some of the boating history on the rivers there?
I'll try. The best way I can describe it is I've heard stories. I haven't got to do any of the old time boating. So back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they had wooden john boats that were typically 18 to 24 feet long, and they were, really narrow. They were 3 feet wide, maybe 4 feet if you had a big boat. And so they were planked together with wood, similar to the way this guy's built right here. They were maybe tied together different, and you had some that were made out of plywood. And just over time, that has expanded into materials like fiberglass, aluminum, things like that. Not really sure how else to specify any of that. It's just over time things have evolved.
One of the things about this festival in particular is the Ozarks culture is something that is constantly changing, and the variety is fantastic and wonderful. But even with that change, we can see some commonalities. For instance, on the rivers, and I'm familiar with some of the rivers in the Ozarks because I enjoy canoeing as a recreation. We have beautiful rivers, and I noticed that the Marshallese boat also has kind of that canoe shape, and it's really neat to kind of see that relationship between the canoes that were traditionally familiar with throughout history, even from early Americans and Native Americans to current era. But there's some significant differences. So, Liton, tell me about why is there, it almost looks like there's one large canoe, what I would refer to as canoe style boat, and there's a smaller boat there to the side. What is the purpose of that?
Ilo why kujiridum loy ichie Cuba pa di mijo wayo.
So if you notice on this canoe, this side is the outrigger, and then this is the canoe itself.
Muninar kamane kanagayan ang manamacharar ke or chinu to Cuba kain talane kato ngay jalap kato.
So the purpose of the outrigger and these strings here is to control the wave when the wind's pretty strong and the wave's pretty strong. Somebody has to be standing on this end and controlling the ropes.
Toyo mandada chemarong barong lalem nat toyo chon limongon nat toyo chon chimjong lalem nat ngan chongan kajurun kato kay.
So it depends on how the waves are strong. This is like, this is the less strong rope that you pull. The stronger the wave gets, you're going towards the inside of the rope. So the last one or the end is just a little bit to control the wave. The more you go inside, it's controlling the heavier wave, harder wave.
So obviously there's a tremendous amount of craft and skill in both of these Ozarks cultures here. So I want to come back and talk about this beautiful boat. But Anthony and Rebekah, let's talk a little bit about, did you bring a sample of your gig with you?
I didn't bring one up here with me today.
Okay.
I thought about it, and as I was kind of in a hurry. I actually forgot this was going on this morning, so get caught up and stuff. But so a fish gig is similar to Poseidon's trident, only on a smaller scale. They're anywhere from 8 to 13 inches long. They might have 3 prongs, they might have 4, and we'll use those to take northern hog suckers and yellow suckers in our streams. We put those on a 16-foot pole, and we'll be standing in the front of an aluminum john boat at night. So we've got huge lights around this john boat, and that's what we'll use to catch fish during the winter months. It's one way to feed our families. It's another way to just get together and have some other family time, you know, like kind of like a reunion. People we may not see all the time.
So sticking with you, Anthony, so we're talking about passing down traditional skills
Right.
throughout families and the community and so forth. So how many generations did you say was it the 4th generation
Yep.
gig maker? Okay.
Yep, I'm the 4th generation. It started between 1900 and 1920 with my great-grandfather. That didn't sound good. And then my grandpa picked it up about 1960, and then my uncle about 1998, give or take. And then in between, there was a guy that my grandfather taught, Ray Joe Hastings. He's the guy that taught me after Grandpa passed away. I've been doing it about 3 years now.
Liton, can you tell us about how you learned how to make the boats and how you're passing along those traditions of that craft?
Ilo ke chungula iya igar chino ya kada kaman wachiri aiwa riu enot wai pada riu denot toy kein make control.
When I was 10 years old, I started doing a smaller canoe. We call it Liut. Yeah, it's like a toy. We really didn't use it on the sea, but I made it. That's how I started.
Olive ligaro lo chiujugun bere roido kumuji kukurim lale wado amat.
So all the boys that age would always make the smaller canoe, and we would have a race with the see has the fastest canoe when we were that age.
Egar chuna tanak pangain chun canoe builder.
And since there, I've been dreaming of wanting to be a canoe builder.
Kanage road chimal ragar chedro nara chala kamanwa.
My grandfather was one of the men that knew how to make canoes back home.
And wayar kanan kadang win marungun chala emechun kamanda nan karga.
And I took his talent. He teach me how to do it, and now I'm one of the many less canoe builders that are left now.
MK John family, igar kamani John kurup ilnugaro ngan chigje wa ledo leda kilo chalapone.
And a few years ago, I gathered all my sons, my grandsons, to learn how to make canoe, and we were just giving out to anybody for free.
And Oregon Wailo Majalan.
Important of this canoe.
Kanave Kurare Jeno wash it tran Buddha island and island. You know that I mean Kajarwal wash goes and taxis to man Washington DC.
So this is our transportation, just like anybody here in the U.S. They use horses to go from Texas to another state. We travel from one atoll to another using the canoe.
Lukun will live in peace and me Maron Waka Kachitavan Shallow Museum and Crystal Bridge and Walok Talanewa Janani.
So this is one of my talent that I've now shown to Crystal Bridges and those in the Ozarks, building canoe. Thank you very much.
That's cool. So I gotta know, like, how far can you guys actually travel in a canoe that you've built? You know, what's your typical distances?
Every and I can get Chichalor Kudu, nay to Kudu man by with Parpuchun coach, and Armenian Maya Rad Chale, Rajab Kajarvan Navigator, Arad Kajarval Iju, come no. Nagaya to Emerong Alling, Mary Kudu, Emerong Allinginam, Chiparek, everyone and number can get Chapaman weather.
So it depends on the weather. If the wave is hard and then the wind is blowing very hard, you could get from one island to another within days. But if the wave is not strong, then it's going to take longer days for you to get there. Yeah, and it really depends on the wave. I mean, we never used map or compass back then.
Right.
The sailors would always use the stars and the wave and see where they're going, where they're navigating to.
Right on.
So Liton, were the boats strictly for transportation, or did you fish from them as well?
Elgar Kajarvalangan, can I Ilo, Manadavan Griva, Armu Road Lodge.
So it was basically for fishing. In our tradition back home,
Armu Road Lodge.
our life is on the sea.
Anthony, Are there folks that use canoes for gigging? Is canoes? I mean, would you be able to gig with a canoe?
Typically, the canoes that we have in the Ozarks aren't going to be stable enough for that. I've never seen anybody do it, but I have always wanted to try gigging from a kayak, so that may be something that happens in the future.
Maybe you could take back some of the outrigger technology back to Current River, and you could get a stable canoe for gigging.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah. So canoes in the Ozarks traditionally are more used with like a fishing pole and fishing line.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
We'll float the rivers with them, stuff like that, but they're more of just a recreational thing.
Right. So you mentioned previously about the early John boats. Nowadays they're mainly aluminum craft, right? And so what type of wood are used on the early John boats?
So the ones that I know of were typically put together with either white oak or ash. White oak held up really, really well. Ash held up good for a while. It was used primarily because it was lighter wood and it seemed to float a lot better, but the white oak was probably the best. And then we've seen some that were built with pine, yellow or white pine, just whatever's indigenous to the area. And I mean, typically, you know, guys would hew these out and cut these boards for these in their backyards. You know, they would have a hand-drawn sawmill or something like that. Oh, she's got us a representation of a fish gig. So typically that's a 16-foot pole. This is where you come in. You can tell a little more about this. You've been doing this all day. You haven't got to talk up here yet.
I don't know anything about boats.
Well, tell us a little bit about that gig because it looks impressive.
So the gig, this here is the gig. We say that we're going gigging because we normally have this on a 16-foot pole, and we will stand on the front of that boat. Try not to knock anything over here. But we'll take it on the front of that boat and we will stab at the fish. Our waters are pretty crystal clear. On a good night, you can see almost 10 feet into the water. But you gotta know what you're looking for on these fish. We go for bottom feeding fish. They're yellow suckers, hog suckers, drum. I guess I won't go completely into what the fish is like, but that's what we're going for. We have our own season, so it's from September through the winter months to February. It's pretty regulated. We're allowed 15 fish per person each night that we go gigging. But it's a bit of a sport because this is kind of a skill. You got to know what you're looking for. You got to be able to take in the refraction of the water. So if you're wanting to get that fish, you want to aim in front of the fish because then once you actually go into the water, you should be on top of it. I'm not that great at it. The one time I tried, I put my gig down right in front of the boat. Don't do that because then it's going to pop back up and hit you in the face. Thankfully, I dodged. Or if you don't have, I'm right-handed, and if I'm with another right-handed person, we're smacking each other in the back of the head with a pole. So there's a little bit of skill to it, but it's a lot of fun and it's a lot of family stuff. Our son is 9, and in the last year or two, he's been able to get out on the boat and gig a fish himself.
Liton, do they have any type of gigs or what are the fishing methods for the Marshallese?
Elang kain yamar which yamar kin long line yamar tuna ilo kin ja kin yo chit ka to no yo va na to yamar tuna yo alu kain ni you can nor recommendation di channel kilin musta kilin matawul inga one majid lar yamar para base.
So they use oyster skins to grab the fishes too, but it'll be like 15 feet out, bottom meters as well.
So they use a net or okay.
It's a net, yeah.
Okay.
Take one cast.
Cast.
Okay, cast net.
Yeah,
Awesome.
cast net.
We can't do that. So we've had people try to do some cast net fishing in the Ozarks, and our river just takes that thing and carries it away.
That Rebecca, that pole's 16 feet long. So traditionally, I know that canoes on the rivers in the Ozarks use paddles. Do you ever use that 16-foot long pole to pole along the river, or are they not meant for that?
They will in some areas. If you get a little too close to some big rocks along the edge, you'll reach out with your pole and kind of help push you away from that. But yeah, some areas can be 14 feet deep. You can gig 6 inches of water to 14, 16 feet of water. It just depends on where you're at on the river. But yeah, if they get the boat a little too close, they'll just take their pole and push away. Don't really do it along.
Well, to add to that, back whenever the Wooden John boats were in service, that's how they got up and down the river. They poled up and down the river. So
Sorry, I'm more modern.
You're all right. They would actually take a gig, flip it upside down, and put the pointy end up, and they would use that wooden pole to pole up and then float down. And they might do that 3 or 4 times a night, and that's how they would kill their fish. We would also, on those Wooden John boats, when we were gigging, we didn't have rails and lights back then. We had fire pots. So there'd be 3 to 4 fire pots hanging off the ends of those boats or off the sides. And they'd just have pine knots or big chunks of wood, and they would burn over the water. And that's how we would see the fish back then. So it was a little dangerous, but you stayed warm. I mean, it wasn't nothing like today. We freeze to death.
Right.
So.
Well, speaking of staying warm, also staying dry. So one thing I do know about the old Wooden John boats is when you had a brand new boat, you actually left it in the river so that those boards would swell
Right.
and make it watertight.
Right.
And I was going to ask Liton if there is a similar process with the hull of the Marshallese boats, to where the planks or the woods have to swell to make it watertight.
So how would they seal that? Yeah.
Yeah, how would they seal, make the boat watertight so it holds water?
Oh, emang ilo wine kumujerido loy, ayat kemana le cirikan wine. Ilo ijo kanan ijo kabujo, eor ciciluk nang enot kasket.
So where he was pointing out, this part of the canoe, we also used pandanus leaf inside of it to hold it.
Uneo nge tudu nangai red boko mecha marong driong dan loan wine.
So when the pandanus leaves gets wet on the bottom, and sands won't go in nor water will go in, because the pandanus leaves will hold it off, push it off.
Em ngai ganan cholong. Ganan kamana le wine.
He wants to explain the canoe.
Ilo wai kumiredom loy kay nagdakay rich kali karga wan hiruidron majo.
So looking at this canoe, you notice these feathers. It represents that this canoe belongs to our high chiefs. Because usually the normal ones, you don't have these leaves. But if you see leaves on a canoe, you know that's the high chief's canoe.
Em manadewan rojak iya riba rojak man igichena man em alala riba rojak kare igichen kare.
And there's 2 meaning of these wood that are on this, the pandanus leaf of the sail. On top here, it represents the man. On the bottom wood here, it represents the woman.
Kaya manadewan emman yude chen kare.
Because in our tradition, man is above or higher than women.
Echap kanagay yude ilo akanagay paranjon pamali akarero majalalan an kare. It ro air majalala ni kare.
And it's not just because, you know, men are supposedly powerful or anything stronger, but because we represent, we honor our men as our household. They're the head of the household of each family member.
Kubage riwa barkare. Ne jalok kubak wai wana magdud ne jalok kare evan jone ejak yod family.
And the outrigger, they also represents women. If you don't have a woman in your family, you're out of luck.
Father jo man iro joran kujuye arvi joran.
And here on top with this feather represents the high chief, and below that stick also represents the people of the high chief.
Ever work control ilo yenwe olak kedo right kedarwan control over ujlawan narong kedo iloan.
This also here by the stick in the middle controls also the wave, so the sail doesn't fly back and forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's so much symbology to that that's just amazing. It tells its own story. It really does. And such craftsmanship. Anthony, tell us just a little bit more about, you told a really touching story yesterday about the traditions within your family. And I was really interested on, you might not think, but each one of those gigs has its own personality, has its own traits that you brought down from your grandfather and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
So, I try to make my gigs as closely similar to Grandpa's as I can. I love the way his look. They have a beauty about them that a lot of others don't. My great-grandfather's gigs were what I call rough, which mine kind of still rough too, but great-grandpa, when he made a gig, generally it was used within a few hours of being made. Grandpa kind of perfected it. It became an art form to him, and he wanted people to look at his gigs and say, I want that. And so I do the same thing. I take a lot of pride in making that, and I've tried to adapt his style. I'm not exactly there, and I don't want to be exactly like him, but I want to be close. And eventually I'll pass it on to my son. But he's little. He's 9, so he's got some time.
Or we know that there are some master gig makers in your region that are well known, and your family being one of them. But were there also some master boat makers, I guess you might call them, in the area?
There are some master boat makers. So there's a guy from Doniphan that still kind of makes wooden john boats. I believe his health has gotten bad, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I tried to look it up earlier, and I just couldn't find it in my book. But he's 82 or 83 years old. He's been making wooden john boats since he was a kid. He learned from his grandpa and his dad. They all made them together. And they still use wooden john boats. They don't like our aluminum boats that we use today. So they say theirs hold up longer, and they probably do. You take care of them right. I know there's a few other people around that make them, but I've never heard who they are or where they're even at. But I do know that there are.
Well, that's wonderful that your son has an interest in your craft. Yeah. I wanted to ask Liton if the children in your community have an interest. Is there a hope to pass along these very important crafts and skills to the next generation? Is there an interest there?
Terrain or Niju Navaro Rich. kamanwa rajala ramarong magi kamani chunwa kamani chun wujala ino trevina do yar bodo emen chibur larit bren renekada nan paloke irrevoja neighbor kamanwa.
So yes, most of my sons already know how to build canoes. I taught them. I brought 4 grandsons with me to this trip to also learn about the canoe and also make the canoe. They're the one that's actually been putting it up every morning and taking it apart every evening. And they're making the smaller ones as well.
Well, they might be sick of it by the time this is over with,
Yes,
huh?
they are. They're like,
Yeah.
are we gonna have a break-in? Are we not working today?
Well, wonderful. So as we can see, there's a lot of similarities in the two cultures from southeastern Missouri Ozarks as well as northwest Arkansas. The Marshallese canoe, has a lot of similarities to those used on the rivers of southeastern Missouri. And thank you so much for sharing the information about your traditions, your crafts, and so forth. I'd like to take some questions from the audience if we have any. Sure.
Emman kachi taka kinala mada chon kamu
Please give them a round of applause. Great question.
engai am kamani chon wa kojai ko yin blane nge lalim pamle nam koi ko yin kamane ke bagai lo wai wen merong po alben pamle nam em chongan aya takon chongan ude yen em chongan re.
So it depends on your family or who's gonna ride in that canoe, how big you want to make the canoe so you can fit as many people in that canoe. But usually when the wave is hard, the wind is pretty bad, you need someone on the outrigger to control it while someone's controlling sailing inside.
So typically with the old wooden john boats, if they were 24 foot long and say 4 feet wide, 5 feet wide, I know I've seen pictures of at least 4 to 5 people in those. Anything more than that, and they just get too heavy to move. These new aluminum boats, man, you range from 6 people all the way down to 2. No more than 6 in these new boats because there's just not room for them. There's so much other stuff that we pack into these things nowadays. With the technologies, everything's expanded. So we have live wells, we have steering wheels, just junk.
The generator.
Yeah, and during gigging season, we've got generators and stuff up there. So during gigging season, we typically only have 3 to 4 people in our boat. We'll have 2 people up front gigging, 1 person runs the motor, and on occasion we'll have a 4th person that stands in the very center of the boat and gigs fish that the people up front miss. So that's kind of my favorite part. Yes.
Any other questions? Well, let's have a round of applause for Liton, Litha, Anthony, and Rebekah. They did a fantastic job telling us about the similarities of canoes in the Ozarks, and what a wonderful culture and tradition. Thank you all.
I have a question.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we don't really have a lot of wind that I can really think of while we're out on the water, but our canoes are really easy to tip. So could you have a canoe like that without the sail on it and it would still work to go down our rivers?
Ay dilo naman kayo dagang pomol ilo kar wayo kimar kamani ilo Crystal Bridge mariru chiguru rar wayan rar anan kagi ino anri wayan ilo Crystal Bridge ilalin Crystal Bridge echor maran anan.
So yeah, you could just use this and without the sail. The boat that's out near the canoe that's out near our tent belongs to Crystal Bridges. Two of his grandsons rode in it and used it to go down the lake at Crystal Bridges.
Wow.
Without the sail.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Please remember that Litha and Liton both have an exhibit with a full-size boat, and you can feel free to ask more questions as well. And Anthony and Rebekah also are forging gigs, also down towards that end of the festival.